Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm Nancy Cordes. Our next guest, John Podesta, was the chairman of Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. His private emails were hacked and released publicly by Russian-backed entities during the campaign. Mr. Podesta, thank you so much for being with us.
Nice to be back, Nancy.
For anyone who voted for Hillary Clinton, these new indictments mean what?
Well, look, it's a tragedy for the American people, really. As Mr. Mueller said in his indictment, this was an act of information warfare against the United States, against our democracy. So I think it's obviously disappointing to those of us who were on the receiving end of these Russian active measures. But I think the real victims here are the American people, because there was direct interference with our democratic institutions. The
Deputy Attorney General was very careful on Friday to say that we don't know whether or not this operation swayed the election. You've had a lot of time to think about this. Where do you come down on that issue?
Well, look, this was one part of a complex, active interference in the measures. This didn't even deal with the hacking. This was only about what was going on in the social media and the information campaign that was being done there. But there were 80 people, millions of dollars spent. And as one of your previous guests, Senator Coons, noted, we won the popular vote by 3 million votes. They were pushing votes, just to give one example, to Jill Stein. Her vote in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin was greater than the gap between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in those states. So you can't prove that it did affect the outcome, but it certainly seems likely that it had some impact.
But it does beg the question, how is it that these Russian operatives knew to focus on purple states like Michigan and Wisconsin, and your campaign didn't?
Well, of course, we spent a lot of time and energy and effort in all those states.
Hillary Clinton herself did not spend much time in those states.
We had Tim Kaine was there, Barack Obama was in, and she spent enormous time in Pennsylvania and Michigan.
Sure.
And we spent a lot of effort. We had more staff in Wisconsin than even President Obama had in 2012. But I think that begs the question. I think we focused on the places we thought were that were, in contest, and in the end of the day, we fell short in those states. And I think that this active measures effort by the Russians could have tilted the election in Donald Trump's favor. But I think what the real issue is how he's reacted to it. And in that context, if this is information warfare, then I think he's the first draft dodger in the war. Mm-hmm. I mean, he has done nothing but tried to undermine the Mueller investigation. He hasn't implemented the sanctions that was passed by the Congress and that he signed in reaction to the activities in the 2016 election. We learned this week he's ordered no effort to try to get the intelligence community to get together to try to prevent further activities in the 2018 election.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that it's because to do so would be to admit that somehow the Russians might have influenced this election?
Well, I think that Mr. Trump's psyche is complicated, and people have said a lot about it. But he certainly can't accept that this activity may have helped him, and I think he just constantly tries to move the ball away, including what was, I think, really a despicable tweet about the fact that he's blaming the FBI for investigating the Russia investigation and somehow relating that to the tragic killings in Florida. But, who knows with Mr. Trump, but he clearly, I think, has failed in carrying out his duty as President of the United States, which is to protect our democracy.
Midterm elections are coming up, and it's been reported that Democrats are telling your former boss, Bill Clinton, that in light of the Me Too movement, they think he should sit it out. He should be benched, and they're not looking for him to actively campaign for them. Is that true, and do you think that that's the right call?
Look, I think, he's remains, I think, a figure who is popular with a lot of Democrats across the country, and I think that people are calling him, candidates are calling him and asking for advice. But whether he's going to be an active participant, I think that's not, really on the top of his mind right now. I think he's doing other things, and people make their own judgments about whether he can be helpful in the campaign.
Do you think it's a good idea, very quickly, for him to sit it out?
Well, look, I think that if I was advising a campaign and a candidate about what to do, I would sort of judge whether he can be helpful. And I think some places he can be, and probably some places he's more of a lightning rod.
All right, John Podesta, thank you so much, campaign chairman for Hillary Clinton. And we'll be right back with our panel of Republicans who are leaving the House and Senate. Midterm elections are always perilous for the party in power, and this year a record number of Republicans have already decided not to run for re-election. 24 are retiring from the House and Senate, plus 5 are leaving to run for higher office. Why so many? Well, that's the question we put to 4 departing Republicans, including Ed Royce, who's one of 10 committee chairmen who have announced they're hanging it up.
That's a lot of experience out the door.
It is, and there's a debate. You know, I think we should look at maybe the length of our chairmanships, but at the same time, I think these term limits are probably good from the standpoint of bringing in new blood, new ideas, and so that's one of the things we weigh on the Republican side.
Senator, when you left your House colleagues and went to the other side of the Capitol, I'm sure you intended to serve more than one term in the Senate.
I always thought probably 2 terms, but I'm kind of out of step with my party. And it makes it very difficult to have the positions that I have and win re-election in a Republican primary.
So have you changed, or has the party changed?
I don't think I've changed that much, but I do think the party has changed considerably.
Do you all agree with that?
Well, from my standpoint, I think that the party has always been a big tent party. I think there's room in the party for a lot of different viewpoints.
Do you think that the tent is as big as it used to be?
No, I don't, actually. I think what's happening in Congress is the political center is collapsing. But that's not true across the country. What I found is that we have become enormously polarized here in Congress, and that polarization has led to a paralysis. I mean, the very simple, basic tasks of governing, just keeping the government open.
But if folks like you leave, don't things just get worse?
I think that part of the answer here, though, is for us to look at what we can do to change the fact that no longer do we really have the types of friendships across the aisle that we once had.
But when you
That's
look at-
important. But
when you
yes.
look at the future of the Republican Party, I think that we would be foolish to not see that we're heading into trouble. Very few women are running for on the Republican Party ticket for office. Far greater numbers of women are identifying themselves as being in the Democratic Party. Minorities that have always been traditionally a group that we should really be going after. I don't see that we really have a recruiting program that's active to get minorities involved in our party. So the growth of our party, it seems to be very limited in a specific group, whereas the demographics of our great country is changing greatly. And when you look ahead, what's our future going to be? Are we going to end up a marginalized party? I think that we need to look toward the future, and we need to have the policies that attract millennials, women, and minorities. I don't see that.
Well, you know, people have been sounding that alarm bell within the party for a while, and you're doing pretty well right now. You've got the White House, the House, and the Senate. So what incentive is there to change?
I think there's a fundamental political realignment happening in our country. You look at where the Democrats are, they've gone kind of full Bernie. Bernie is more or less taken over their party, even though he didn't win the nomination. On our side, you know, Donald Trump took over the Republican Party. And I do think that this political ground is shifting. Under our feet, nobody knows quite how it will settle. In our party, a lot of members have adjusted their politics to suit the president. You know, it's really about loyalty to the man more than it is about any set of given principles or ideals. And I think that's what's really changed.
I would agree with that, and I agree with Eliana in terms of where the Republican Party is going and the danger. If you look every 4 years, every presidential election cycle, we are as a country 2% less white. Voters of color, it's changing that way. And I don't think that we've made enough of an effort as Republicans to appeal across a broader electorate. And then with young people as well, given some of the positions and the behavior that the president has exhibited, I think it makes it very difficult for young people to identify with the Republican Party. I think they've been walking away from the party in general. I think they're at a dead sprint right now, and we've got to change that.
We don't need to change our principles. We don't need to change what we stand for. But like Charlie said, not every vote is a loyalty vote, whether you're for or against the president. And that's how it's framed all the time. You've got to be a loyal soldier. I don't think people feel as comfortable, the moderate Republicans feel as comfortable with this kind of tone.
Well, on this issue, though, if you think about individually, Eliana, what we're doing, we have recruited female candidates, Asian candidates, Hispanic candidates. You've helped elect 3 now. You've got 3 members who are Hispanic that I know you played a large role in their elections. I think we'll continue in this vein.
But she is pro-immigration reform, pro-hiking the minimum wage, pro-same-sex marriage. Could you have gotten elected in a Republican primary for the first time now?
I think so. It depends a lot on the personality of the candidate and getting back to what the Republican Party used to be, where we were accepting of all types. And yes, we're doing a pretty good job in recruiting candidates at the local level, at the state level. But when you look at the makeup of the Democratic Party here in Congress, I don't see those Asian women and those minority women serving in the House GOP or in the Senate GOP. I mean, that's the reality. Maybe our farm team is slowly coming up, but we used to be more accepting of having moderate positions, and now it's getting harder.
It starts at the top. I agree with that. Candidates matter, and we have a responsibility to do our bit. But at the top, when the president makes incendiary comments on Hispanics, Muslims, women, the Charlottesville situation, and others, I think it narrows our appeal. And I do believe that we have to be much broader in our thinking and show that we want that the welcome mat is actually out and that we want everybody in.
It's like Charlie said, it's become kind of a loyalty test to the man rather than to principles. And then the problem is if you, as a candidate or as an elected official, align yourself to a person rather than principle, then you're wedded to that person wherever he or she goes, and that's dangerous. It really is, and I see that a big problem for the party going forward.
And you've got the Freedom Caucus, this group of conservatives, telling the Speaker of the House, your leadership position is at risk if you stray too far from where we want to be on immigration.
I've never supported these types of tactics. Trying to sack your own quarterback is not a strategy, frankly, that usually when you're working as a team is going to lead to success, right? Threats usually don't lead to success.
They've had some success.
What would lead to success, I don't think that's successful in terms of getting legislation into effect.
Senator, when you talk about immigration, mass violence, opioids, has Congress lost its ability to solve big problems?
It'd be hard to argue that we haven't. In the Senate, we have a 60-vote requirement for most legislation, and we've had a hard time coming together. There are things that we should, on the gun issue, obviously the bump stocks, no fly, no buy, those kind of things. There's broad consensus in the country, certainly, and there should be, and I hope that we can move legislation like that. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to.
But on immigration, you look at the president's position, and what he says on Monday may be different than what he says on Wednesday, and may be different on Friday. So it's very hard, I think, for leaders on DACA, on Dreamers like Jeff Flake, to figure out a way forward. It's schizophrenic what's coming out of the White House in terms of policy on immigration and Dreamers.
And we'll be right back with those high school students who are crafting a plan to take on Washington. Joining me now are 5 students from Parkland, Florida, who attend Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. They are David Hogg, Alex Wind, and Emma Gonzalez, plus Cameron Caskey and Jacqueline Corin. Thanks so much to all of you for joining me. And Cameron, I'll start with you. You say the adults have let you down.
Well, the adults in office have let us down, absolutely. And fortunately, we have a lot of support from the older generations here. But what we're trying to do here at March for Our Lives is say, the adult politicians have been playing around while my generation has been losing our lives. If you see how they treat each other in the office, if you see the nasty, dirty things going on with them, it's sad to think that that's what they're doing while 17 people are being slaughtered and gunned down only yards away from where we're sitting right now. And March for Our Lives has support from everybody. And at the end of the day, this isn't a red and blue thing. This isn't Democrats and Republicans. This is about everybody and how we are begging for our lives and we are getting support, but we need to make real change here, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
So, Emma, what is the plan? You say you want to spark a national movement. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually make it happen. What are you going to do?
Well, what we have set up right now, we have a website, March for Our Lives. We're going to be doing a march in March on Washington where we get students all over the country are going to be joining us. These kids are going to make this difference because the adults let us down. And at this point, I don't even know if the adults in power who are funded by the NRA, I don't even think we need them anymore because they're going to be gone by midterm election. There's barely any time for them to save their skins, and if they don't turn around right now and state their open support for this movement, they're going to be left behind because you are either with us or against us at this point.
We are giving a lot of the politicians that we feel neglected by a clean slate because that's the past and we understand that. But from here on, we are creating a badge of shame for any politicians who are accepting money from the NRA. It is a special interest group that has most certainly not our best interests in mind, and this cannot be the normal. This can be changed, and it will be changed. And anybody who tells you that it can't is buying into the facade that's being created by the people who have our blood on their hands.
David, a lot of people saw the reporting that you did from inside the school while the shooting was taking place, and I'm truly sorry that all of you had to live through that. But I want to read to you what President Trump said last night. He said that it's actually the Democrats that have let you down because they didn't pass legislation when they controlled Congress. Does he have a point?
President Trump, you control the House of Representatives, you control the Senate, and you control the executive. You haven't taken a single bill for mental health care or gun control and passed it. And that's pathetic. We've seen a government shutdown. We've seen tax reform, but nothing to save our children's lives. Are you kidding me? You think now is the time to focus on the past and not the future to prevent the death of thousands of other children? You sicken me.
So what kinds of laws do all of you think should be on the books that aren't right now?
Well, what I think needs to be on the books right now that isn't is literally any law that's from either side of the political spectrum. If you're a Republican that supports mental health care, we want you out there making your voice heard because that's just as important as gun control or gun safety laws at this point. Because Democrats also want gun safety rules, and we can't get into any more debates. We need discussion. We've had the debates, and people have died as a result. Children have died and will continue to if we don't stop now and look at both sides of this because we can't wait around any longer. Children are dying as a result, and we need to take action. And I call on President Trump and the Republican-controlled House and Senate and executive branch to work together, get some bills passed, and stop taking money from the NRA because children are dying, and so is the future of America as a result.
And I just want to say something I've heard a lot is the word gun rights. And that has the connotation that we are trying to strip people of their rights. Well, first of all, we have the right to live. And second of all, here at March for Our Lives, at least for me, we don't want to take the guns away from Americans. My father is a police officer, he has guns, and I understand that having concealed weapons is good for protecting yourself. But an AR-15 is not needed to protect your house from robbers. It's not needed to hunt bears. An AR-15 is a weapon of war, and a 19-year-old who is mentally challenged and has problems was able to buy an AR-15 easily. We don't want to disarm America. We want to make America have to work for their weapons, and we have to make sure that everybody who has this kind of power in their hands has been cleared to have it. Because if Nicholas Cruz had gone through 5 minutes with any medical professional, they would have said, this person does not need an AR-15, this person needs a counselor. and 17 people would not have needed graves.
Alex, your own Senator Marco Rubio says that more gun laws won't do anything, that anyone who wants to commit violence is going to find a way to get a gun.
If you think that, Senator Rubio, then change the way it's easier to get a gun, okay? If you think it's too easy to get a gun, do something about it. Make it not easier to get a gun. March 24th on the March for Our Lives is only the beginning. This is the first march, but I can guarantee it will not be the last. We will be marching for the 17 we lost at our school. We will be marching for everyone we lost at the Newtown Sandy Hook shooting, at Columbine, at Virginia Tech, in San Bernardino, Orlando, at the Pulse shooting, and at Las Vegas. This is only the beginning, and March 24th, things are going to change.
It's not our job to tell you, Senator Rubio, how to protect us. The fact that we even have to do this is appalling. Our job is to go to school, learn, and not take a bullet. You need to figure this out. That's why you were unfortunately elected. Your job is to protect us, and our blood is on your hands.
Well, I know that millions of people are watching to see where you take this movement. You've already got tens of thousands of followers online, and we'll be watching to see if you're able to change a pretty entrenched political dynamic here in Washington. Thank you so much to the five of you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in to 60 Minutes tonight for Margaret Brennan's interview with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. For Face the Nation, I'm Nancy Cordes, and we're going to leave you today with a memorial to the 17 victims of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas high school shooting.